Hi everyone, how are you all doing? Good, silent nodding. That was not the response I was after, but I'll take it. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we've been discovering to do with upskilling around AI. I know everyone has probably heard enough about AI, but hopefully I'm going to tell you something a bit new, which is a report that we've been working on together with DX. But you might remember this study that was released earlier this year. This was put out by METR, not the Facebook one, the Model Evaluation and Threat Research Group. And it was using the sort of tools that were available in the first quarter of this year and measuring developer productivity. In advance of doing the work, developers thought that they were going to get faster. On average, they thought the work would take them 24% less time as a result of using the tools. They then did some work, and afterwards they thought that they had taken, on average, 19% less time. But of course, they were measured while doing the work with AI tools, and in fact, they took 20% more time. Developers are directionally wrong about whether these tools are helping them be productive and efficient. But in an appendix to this report, there was information about the breakdown of the developers. And what was interesting, I think, is that the developer with the most expertise, this one person over on the far right, was actually significantly faster using AI tools. They were 20% faster. And this kind of gave us an idea. Having more expertise means that they were able to achieve more. Maybe that's repeatable. So we had this hypothesis. If we could look at the dev in that study and basically replicate that experience, giving people more expertise, could they then become more productive rather than less? We did that through these 6 90-minute sessions that we designed. And this is kind of how we work, is about building expertise. We believe strongly in learning through experience, not through lectures or videos. And so we aim to accelerate the gaining of that expertise. So we thought that increasing skills could increase productivity. And there were 3 kinds of outcome that we think are interesting to measure here. So firstly, there's sentiment. Ultimately, I think the goal here is to bring everyone to the middle. We have all met developers, I'm sure, who are a little bit nervous about AI. They've seen some poorly written, generated code, and as a result, they've sworn off it altogether. You've probably also met developers who are overusing generative AI, generating bad code, but just sort of YOLOing it into production and seeing what happens. We think there's a middle ground where you use generative AI everywhere where it's sensible to and able to do a good job, and nowhere else. There's also utilization. We want to bring people to the middle more. Again, those people who are overusing it probably need to be tamed a little bit, and people who haven't seen the potential or are nervous about the potential should be shown how to use it and make good use of it in their existing workflows. And then lastly, productivity. This should increase, right? The measures we care about for productive teams should improve if this is a useful tool being used well. And we're very excited to partner with DX for doing this. DX is built to give a 360 view of all of these kind of aspects of productivity and to look at the way that they interact with each other to correlate them. They're very interested in this area, and so they were keen to partner with us for the study, which means that we can then see how all of these measures are affecting the others. Before I go on, I want to note some caveats, like science is hard. And one thing, it never happens in isolation. Like, teams are always changing the way they work in multiple different ways at a time. It's very hard to tease all of those aspects apart. And certainly what we do in learning is only ever going to be one aspect of a way that a team changes. It can enable change, but it doesn't by itself make the change happen. I should also say I'm presenting just the start because we're now working towards a much bigger study in a second phase, which I'll talk about more in a second. We worked with 14 companies to do this. We worked with between 1 and 10 teams at those different companies. Some of those companies were happy for us to cite them, so particularly grateful to these folks here who were all involved in putting together this study. Let's talk about some concrete data and what we found. So in one company, we worked with 50 engineers out of a total of about 300. They self-rated before and after in their sentiment in a variety of ways. So before is going to be shown in blue, after in red. And you can see that afterwards they became more confident in using the tool, so more of the team either very or extremely confident. They became more confident in evaluating AI systems. They actually became slightly less optimistic about AI. I think that's a good thing. You're welcome to disagree, but I think that can be a sign that, generally speaking, the people who seem to know more about these about AI tools seem to have more reasonable, measured assumptions about what AI can do for them. This is nice. We know that sentiment can be misleading in terms of overall productivity impact as well. So in another company, we looked more closely at utilization. Being forced to use these tools or being inspired to use these tools will only get people so far. We think that knowing the tools very deeply and feeling like an expert with them is much more likely to get you using them regularly and sensibly. So in company 2, we were measuring utilization by weekly active users of their preferred GenAI tool. We worked with 10 learners there, and they're going to be shown in red with the rest of the team in purple. The period where we started working for them was from mid-August, and that ran until mid-October, so about halfway along this graph till most of the way at the end. And you can see there is a distinct difference between the people who learned with us, who are using 90% of whom are using generative AI tools every week, versus 50% of the rest of the organization. We also looked at productivity in this organization, and it was an interesting one because the learners that we were working with here were spread across multiple different teams. We weren't looking at entire teams together. We still took individual measures for productivity to see what would happen. And the team we worked with here is going to be shown in purple with the rest of the team in a gray color. And you can see there's no real effect on productivity here, like a slightly faster PR cycle time for the group we worked with, but it's not a massive difference. This makes sense to me. I think software engineering is a team sport. It doesn't really make sense to think about that kind of learning intervention or that productivity at the individual level. We care about what teams are producing. And I know that's a core DX belief as well. So we took this and we thought, if we could take a team where everyone learned together in the team, what impact would that have on productivity? Which brings me on to company 3. Here we worked with around 15 out of 40 engineers. Those 15 were split between 2 teams working on a related part of their product. We looked first at the change in the developer experience index. So this is a measure of how the developers sort of view their own productivity. And we compared our study group with a control group and looked at the change in the developer experience index before and after. So here green is an increase and red is a decrease. Clearly some of this is just kind of like small changes due to noise. There are some ways in which both the study and control groups improved over this period. But I think you can see that the study group has big improvements in terms of feeling faster to iterate, feeling like decisions were significantly easier and having more confidence in more maintainable code. We also measured PR throughput. So we looked at the PR throughput normalized per person. And what we saw there was it significantly grew for the study group, shown in blue here, and was fairly stable and slightly decreased actually for the control group, who are shown in red. Now, I said before that study group was in 2 teams. Interestingly, one of them was working on a fairly young project which hadn't accumulated a lot of technical debt, and the other half were working on an existing project which was a bit more complex and a bit more kind of tricky to work around. Here the red marked team are the one who are working on the complex existing project, and the blue team were the one who are working on the newer project. And you can see here that the PR throughput increased substantially with AI in the greenfield team, the one working on the newer project, where the brownfield team were fairly stable. This is interesting. This to us subverted a lot of our expectations because we are used to productivity being felt. When we work with a C# team or a database team, they feel more mastery and they get more productive as a result. But AI is kind of different because firstly, there's a lot of overconfident. And actually, it can be a good thing if people are less confident in their abilities with AI because it forces them to really understand the tools better and improve their skills. Understanding more might actually reduce their confidence and their usage as they realize that there are areas they're currently using AI where they shouldn't expect it to do a good job. And productivity might not correlate with confidence or usage, which is quite different to what we generally see in other technologies that we work with. I said before that this is just the beginning for us. We're going on to a second larger phase of this study. If you would like to be involved in that or just talk to us about the rest of what we do, please come to the stand. We are able to offer discounts for companies that want to be involved in the GenAI study. And then lastly, I'll say thank you for your attention. I know another talk on AI from a sponsor was the last thing you needed to hear, but the good news is it's now lunchtime. Thank you.